Hello everybody. Let's learn about two-point perspective. It'll be useful and handy to have your one-point perspective exercise on hand. We'll be dealing with all the same terminology. There'll be a horizon line, a vanishing point, but in this case, since it's two-point perspective, we're going to deal with two vanishing points. We'll see much more orthogonal lines here. In one-point perspective, the front face of these boxes were the things we were imagining that we were facing directly. So they weren't getting any farther from us, any of these four edges. In two-point perspective, we're turning this box just a little bit in space so that we're looking at one of the edges. To begin with, orient your paper landscape like this. Let's get your name and period number on the top right corner. And let's draw a horizon line straight through the middle of the paper. Make sure that your ruler's edge is parallel, meaning going in the same direction as the long side of the paper. Using light pressure, draw yourself a horizon line. After you do that, mark yourself one vanishing point over here and another vanishing point over here. Leave a little bit of space from the vanishing point and the edges of the paper. This vanishing point we're going to label as VP1. And over here, VP2. It's important we label these so that while I talk you through this lesson, you'll know which vanishing point to connect the dots to. Similarly with what we did with the one-point perspective exercise, we're going to draw boxes in three different positions: above, at, and below the horizon line. In two-point perspective, to draw a box shape, you first start with defining a single vertical edge. I drew this edge above the horizon line at about 1.5 inches. Once you do that, you have the top and the bottom endpoint. Both of these endpoints are going to connect to both vanishing points. So let's start with the top endpoint. Lay your pencil point on the top endpoint of that line. Lay your ruler's edge up against the pencil. Turn your ruler's edge until it's touching VP2 and strike a line. From that same top endpoint, you want to lay your ruler's edge so that it hits VP1 and connect those dots. All the lines so far should be drawn with light construction lines. We're going to do the same with the bottom endpoint over here. Connect it to VP2 as well as to VP1. At this point, we're going to need to define how deep the box goes, both on the left face and the right face. So, starting from this bottom edge over here, determine how deep in space you would like that left face to go. I'm going to put a dot right there. And we also want to do the same for this right edge. I think I want it to go a little longer to the right side. At these two defined dots, we're going to draw vertical lines straight up and down, parallel with this vertical line right there. In two-point perspective, the only lines that do not go to the vanishing point are vertical lines. All others should be orthogonal lines, receding back into space, if they could, forever and ever, toward either of the two vanishing points. Now we've established the left face, and we've established the right face of this box. In order to define the bottom face over here, we need to do something with this dot there and this dot over here. This dot is already connecting to VP1 right there. So you can, through process of elimination, think that, you know what, let's try connecting it to vanishing point 2. And then you start to see the beginnings of the bottom face here. But instead of defining a random point along this line, we're actually going to connect this dot to vanishing point number 1. These two orthogonal lines that we just drew, they should cross each other. And where they cross is the far corner of the box. That's how you draw a box shape in 2-point perspective. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and darken in the outermost lines to make the form of the box a little more visible, pop a little more. And for completion here, let's just label the bottom surface. If you can manage it, try drawing some slightly diagonal flattened lettering. So there's our box in 2-point perspective above the horizon line. Next, we're going to draw a box at the horizon line as well as below the horizon line. For 2-point perspective boxes, the starting point is always the vertical edge closest to us as the viewer. So draw yourself a vertical line, making sure that it crosses the horizon line. And I'm going to draw a second one down over here below the horizon line. Just make sure that these lines are going straight up and down, parallel to the short sides of the paper. Once you establish the vertical edge that we are looking directly at, then you can connect the top and bottom endpoints to both vanishing point 1 and 2. Put your pencil point on VP2, rotate or pivot your ruler's edge so that it lines up with the top endpoint, and connect the two. Also want to do the same to VP1. Then we repeat the process for the bottom endpoint connected to VP1 as well as to VP2. Now comes the time where we determine how deep the box goes, both on the left and the right side. Along this bottom edge over here, determine how far away in space this face goes. I'm going to put a dot there. And then along this edge towards the left, we want to determine how far it goes that way. I'll put a dot there. From these two dots, we're going to draw vertical lines straight up and down. Make sure that your ruler's edge is parallel to both here and this line, as well as the edge, the short edge of the paper right over here. Repeat the same steps over here. And for a box at the horizon line, we only see two faces, the left and the right. Everything else is hidden. Now we can go ahead and darken in the outermost lines. to help that form pop. So remember, we're using two types of lines here. Construction lines that are easy to erase and reposition. Then hard lines when we're sure that we've got everything in the right place, which is what we're using now when we darken in the outermost lines. One more box to go. Same steps. Connect the top endpoint and bottom endpoint to both vanishing points. VP1 connects to the top endpoint. VP2 connects to the top endpoint. Repeat those steps for the bottom endpoint. Connects to VP2. As well as to VP1. Now we're going to take a look at the left and the right faces to determine how far away in space we'd like them to go. I'm going to go a little farther back than I normally would over here. So along this top edge this time, instead of the bottom, let's draw a point right about there. I want to intentionally show you what it looks like when the vanishing point and the dot make an orthogonal line that crosses into an existing object. Let's practice that. Over here, I'm going to define a point right about there. We draw vertical lines going straight up and down from both of those points. So there we have our left face, and we have our right face of this box. We need to determine what the exact shape of the top face of the box is. This vanishing point over here needs to connect with vanishing point 2. Lightly draw a line. A portion of that line is going to intersect. It's going to go inside of this box. You can erase that lightly. We also want to connect this right side corner to vanishing point number 1. Where those two orthogonal lines cross, right there, that's going to give you the final corner of this box over here. And we can finally see the top surface. Darken in the outermost lines of this box, skipping over the portions that go inside of this mid-level box here. So we have a little bit of three-dimensional overlap. And there we have it. 3 boxes in 2-point perspective. Similarly with how we practiced with 1-point perspective, we're going to turn the paper over now and draw ourselves the beginnings of an interior scene. This time, instead of facing a wall straight on, we're going to pretend like we're facing a corner, an interior corner straight on. For this part of the 1-point perspective exercise, we'd establish the horizon line higher up. And if you remember, the higher the horizon line is, the higher your eyes are, right? Your field of view. It's kind of like you're up on a ladder in this room. Let's try the opposite for the 2-point perspective room. We're going to establish the horizon line a little bit lower. Okay, so not the middle of the paper, but slide your ruler down to the bottom third of the paper and establish a horizon line all the way across. Vanishing point number 1 here. Vanishing point number 2 here. Next, we're going to want to determine where the corner of the room is, the far corner of the room is that we are looking at. I'm going to place it toward the left side of the paper. We want to make sure that this line is straight vertical, okay, straight up and down. And we want it to cross over the horizon line. I'm going to erase a bit of the bottom over here so that this portion is smaller than over there. Let's see. Thinking forward here, I actually want to shorten this line a bit too. Okay. The reason why I just did that is because the next steps over here where we define the corners that define where the ceiling meets up with the walls, if the line is too tall, right, too long over here, we'll see very little of those corners, okay? So from the top corner here, from the top end point, I should say here, we're going to lay the ruler so that it falls right on VP1, vanishing point 1, as well as this endpoint. Instead of drawing a line all the way across, I'm just going to start at the top endpoint and go out to the edge of the paper. From that same endpoint, we're going to do much the same, this time in the other direction. Lay the ruler's edge so that it aligns with vanishing point 2, as well as the top endpoint. And we're going to strike a line to the other edge of the paper. We're going to repeat those steps for this bottom endpoint here. We want a kind of an A shape informed by both of those vanishing points. So lay your ruler so that it aligns with both vanishing point 1 and the bottom endpoint here. Make sure you've got your ruler scooched over like you see me doing here so that it can reach the edges of the paper. Strike a line. And we'll repeat the process for vanishing point 2. Align your ruler's edge so it falls right on both those dots and strike a line outwards. Left side wall, right side, ceiling, and floor. That's what we're looking at here. Okay. Let's draw a few boxes within this interior space to kind of populate it with some other objects. First, let's draw a box shape that's going to represent a bed, or the beginnings of the bed. On this edge over here, let's determine how long we want the length of the bed to be from the corner of the room. So I'm going to establish a point right there. And what we can do is lay the ruler so that it aligns with both this dot we made and vanishing point 1, and draw a light construction line that comes far out, in my case almost to the bottom edge of the paper. From here, I want to determine how high I want the bed to be. So I can lay my ruler up to that point and draw a line vertically up. This is the front edge of the bed that's closest to us. Now that we have this located, we're kind of in a similar position with the starting points of these boxes, where we started with the edge closest to us. We just located it using a little bit more information here. So from here, the steps are the same. We've already got the bottom edge connected to VP1. We want to also connect it to VP2. Draw lightly to connect those dots. And we want to do the same for this edge over here by connecting the top endpoint to VP1 as well as to VP2. Now it's not a random spot anymore where we determine how deep the bed goes. It's kind of determined for us by the beginnings of the corners of the room that we drew out. From this point over here, if the bed is right up against the wall, we know that that is the limit for how far this left face of the bed can go. So you can draw a vertical line there. Same thing over here, where this orthogonal line intersects right over here. Intersects meaning crosses with where it meets up with that far bottom corner of the room. That's the maximum distance that the bed can go. So we can draw a vertical line there. These two vertical lines should fall within the two orthogonal lines we drew there. So we have the left face, the right face. We need the top face of the bed. In order to do that, we've got to connect these two corners with the appropriate vanishing points. Corner on the right gets connected to vanishing point 1 on the left. Draw very lightly here. There's going to be a lot of orthogonal lines. This corner on the right, on the left, connects to VP2 on the opposite side. If we lined everything up correctly, where those two orthogonal lines intersect should fall at or very, very close to this far side corner. Okay? You should be able to now trace out the outermost lines of this boxy form. So let's darken it in. So there you have the beginnings of a bed in 2-point perspective. We have a little bit of room here on this wall, so let's draw a box shape that would represent the beginnings of a table. over here, you want to determine how much space there is between the table and the bed, and draw a dot right there. Let's stick around right over here, actually. We want to determine how high the table should be. Definitely wants to be higher than the mattress or the bed over here. So at first you can just lightly draw a vertical line. Let me think here. Do I want it to be much higher? Right about here. Let's call that the height of the table. This is an edge that's going to end up being hidden, but it's useful to place it so that we can determine how much space there is between an existing form right there. Next, we want to take this edge, these two endpoints, and then draw orthogonal lines going out, connecting them to vanishing point 2 on the right side. So first, the bottom edge, and then the top edge. Once you have those construction lines drawn, you can then determine how deep the table goes. It's going to overlap in front of the bed a little bit, and that's fine. From the top edge over here, I'm going to put a dot right there. And then from there, I can draw a vertical line like so. Where these two lines cross, the vertical line we just drew and that orthogonal line, that's one of the corners of the table. What I just established there in this shape is the back face of the table. Let's draw some lines to help us determine how wide the table is. This point over here, align it with your ruler's edge to vanishing point 1. You can lightly draw a line all the way across, or once you've made sure that they're coincident, you can just draw a line from here to the bottom edge of your paper. Let's do the same with this corner over here. Lay your ruler's edge up against your pencil lead. Align the other side of the ruler's edge to VP1 and draw a line across toward the edge of the right edge of the paper. Here on this edge, you can now determine how deep this table goes. I'm sorry, not deep, but how wide the table is. So I'm going to draw a dot right about here. That's where you can draw a vertical line. And this is the edge that is closest to us in our view of this room. Normally, if we can, we want to start with this edge, but that's not always a luxury we have. In this case, we kind of constructed the form here in reverse. Now we have enough information to find the left face of the table as well as the top face. We want to connect this dot to VP2. This dot connects to VP1, and that orthogonal line is going to go all the way across. And that's where we're going to find the back edge of the table here. Lay your ruler so that it's up against this point, also aligned with VP1, and you can strike a line all the way across. That line we just drew, where it crosses with this orthogonal line, that point there tells us where the beginning of the back edge of the table is. We're now going to draw a line vertically right up until we get to this corner. This is the corner of the room where this wall meets with the floor. This is the bottom corner. We're going to connect that to VP2 to draw out the bottom edge of this box form. Now we can darken in all the outermost lines of this box. And before we do that though, let's take a little bit of time to erase or lighten this portion of the bed, because it's going to be hidden behind the table. At this point, we can finish things off with one more box shape, similarly with how we did over here. Let's see what it's like to draw a box shape that's fairly flat, that's up against a wall. For this one, I think I want to make it a similar width to the bed over here. From this edge of the bed, let's draw a light construction line going straight up, vertically. Let's determine how much space there should be between the bed and this panel, canvas, or whatever it might be. Maybe it's a mirror. I'm going to draw a point right here, a little bit below the horizon line, and a point up above over here. So there we already have the back edge of this form. Next, we want to determine how thick it is. To do that, we want to connect both of these back to vanishing point 1 and extend it a little farther out than where these points are. So starting with the bottom endpoint, go ahead, draw a construction line extending outwards like this, where there's a little bit of leftover here. Let's do the same up here. Now we can determine how deep this object should go. I'm going to draw a point right about there. From that point we just determined, we can draw a vertical line. And that gives us two endpoints, up over here and down here, that we can then connect to vanishing point 2. Keep working in light construction lines for now. At the top endpoint, we're going to connect to VP2. The bottom endpoint, we're going to connect also to VP2. On the top edge over here, we can draw a dot to determine how wide this object is. I don't want it to go touching this corner of the wall, whatever this object is. Maybe it's a TV. But that's where I'm going to draw a point right there. From that point, we draw a line down, and it can stop at this bottom orthogonal line right here. That's helping us define the bottom edge of this form. And that's really all we see for this box. The left face, which is very thin, and the right face, which is really broad. We have enough information to darken in the outermost lines to make the form pop. And let's go ahead and darken in the corners of the room. That's the far corner. Here's where the right side wall meets up with the ceiling. Left side wall meets up with the ceiling. Left wall meets up with the floor. And we see a little bit of the bottom right corner right there. And there you have the beginnings of an interior scene in 2-point perspective. Thank you so much for working with me. Next up will be 3-point perspective. All right, everybody, I'll see you in class.